missed you, Mr. Tusk.
Wow. For the first time in a long while, I'm at a loss for words. The less you know going into Tusk, I think the better. In fact, if you've never even heard of this movie, do yourself a favor and go watch it right now. You will not be disappointed. Just know that it takes itself very seriously, but it's written and directed by Kevin Smith. If you have seen this movie, then you know what we're getting into here, so let's waste no more time and see what surprises await in Tusk. First, we meet two podcasters, Wallace and Teddy. They're best friends, and the whole shtick of the podcast is Wallace goes out and has all these experiences, and then comes back into the studio and tells Teddy all about it. Given that Teddy doesn't see what Wallace sees, they call this podcast the Not See Podcast. Yeah, it's a pretty dumb joke, but it does set the mood and starts to show the true colors of these people. One story Wallace brings up is the Kill Bill Kid, similar to the Star Wars Kid video that went viral in the early days of the internet. Except here, the poor guy actually cut his leg off. Apparently, this is hilarious for the two guys, and Wallace manages to get a face-to-face interview with the kid. Wasting no time, he books a flight to Canada and prepares for the interview of a lifetime. But when he gets there, bad news. He offed himself with his own sword. Kind of poetic if you ask me. Well, now Wallace came all this way and has nothing to show for it. Determined to find a story, he goes to a local bar and, while taking a leak, finds something very interesting. A handwritten flyer looking for a roommate and someone to listen to an old man's stories. It goes on to say that he's lived a very long and adventurous life. He's full of tales and just wants to tell somebody about it. Who better than Wallace? This is the perfect opportunity for him. So he jumps at it, first stopping at a convenience store for a soda and directions, and then straight to Howard Howe's estate, which seems to be out in the middle of nowhere. Inside, everything is real elegant and fancy. You can tell everything on the wall has its own story, and Wallace wastes no time getting to know Howard, sipping tea as he goes on and on. First, it's about how he met Ernest Hemingway on a boat in Normandy. Then he ended up slipping Hemingway a bottle of booze. A bottle which he still has. You see, a bottle is just a bottle, but the story behind it is fascinating.
What's this?
The next thing on the wall that catches Wallace's eye is a bone. A very special bone that came from a walrus's penis.
Shut up.
So, there's that.
That's a walrus dick?
Howard goes on to say that he was once lost at sea. While he talks, Wallace is slowly drifting off, fighting sleep. Howard says that he eventually washed up on shore and befriended a walrus. Honestly, I gotta say, the way Howard tells these stories has me hooked. It's very well done. Even a story about how he got a walrus penis is interesting. Howard nicknamed his new friend Mr. Tusk, which seems fitting, and he's very proud of his animal friend, preferring him to humans. It's around this time Wallace does finally pass out. And while he's asleep, he dreams about time spent with his girlfriend Allie. She doesn't want him to go on this trip to interview the Kill Bill Kid, thinking it's a new level of cruel. Even he knows it's wrong, but that's what the people want, and his numbers are increasing each and every week. So he feels like he's got to do it. Why not bring Allie along? Well, Wallace says that Teddy doesn't like it when he does that he's not able to get the full story because she's there censoring him, or so he says. When Wallace comes to, he's in a wheelchair. I think some bells and whistles should be going off in his head right now. But Howard's there, and he has a believable story. He claims that when Wallace passed out, a brown recluse spider came crawling out of his pant leg. Howard called a local doctor, and by the time he got there, the leg was swelled up like an elephant. To stop the poison from getting to his heart, they had no choice. They had to amputate.
Oh my God! There's no leg there.
That night at dinner, Wallace is pretty sus about his situation, and he starts quizzing his captor, who doesn't seem to know that much about spiders, giving him away.
The itty bitty spider crawled up the water spout.
Howard then stands up out of his wheelchair and slaps Wallace in the face, shutting him up. Now he can come clean of his true motives. Are you ready for this?
This man, indeed, a walrus at heart.
That's right. Old Howard here wants to turn Wallace into a walrus. Or in other words, he's nuts. Now back to Allie, and we see that she's pretty upset that Wallace went to Canada. And that seems to be the last straw. She admits to this unknown person in the room that she hates Wallace for what he's put her through. He's no longer the man she fell in love with. I'll give you just one guess as to who the other guy is with her.
So look out, you crazy Canucks. Something weird-ass this way comes.
At the podcast studio, Wallace and Teddy get to talking, and we actually see Teddy defending Allie, while Wallace admits to cheating on her with his groupies. He says that he wanted to take this Canadian trip alone so that he could get some. So really, Wallace is just a big jerk. It kind of justifies what's about to happen to him. Well, sort of. Wallace wakes up to the sound of his cell phone, Allie calling him. Of course, he doesn't make it in time, and when he calls her back, she doesn't hear it. So he leaves a voicemail begging for help and apologizing for his behavior. It's here that we can confirm, yeah, it's Teddy that she's been talking to, confiding in, and I would assume sleeping with. Wallace tries to give as much info as he can over the phone, but before he can get to the important details, he's knocked out. It wasn't all for nothing, however, because in the morning, Allie does get that voicemail, and she and Teddy team up to find him. But will they be too late? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, yes. Yeah, they're too late. Okay, what? I think my life is complete now. Seeing Justin Long in a human skin walrus suit is the thing I didn't know I needed.
Oh, I've missed you, Mr. Tusk.
While Wallace is learning how to be Mr. Tusk, his friends are trying to hunt him down with very little leads. They go to the police, where the detective does give them a little bit of help. In the voicemail, Wallace mentioned the missing leg. There was an ex-cop hunting down a serial killer that fits this MO. For now, that's their only hope.
I told him Canada doesn't have any serial killers. Unless you count the pothead who took out all the Captain Crunch last night at the A to Z.
They meet up with Guy Lapointe.
I'm Guy Lapointe, that is my name.
At no time throughout the entire movie is this actor revealed. Even in the end credits, it's just Guy Lapointe. But I'm here to tell you, it's Johnny Depp. He does a pretty good job, too, as you would expect. Guy tells us that the man he's been hunting has killed 23 people so far, all by amputating their legs and fusing their arms to their body. But none of them were sexually assaulted. So, that's good. Howard bonds with his new friend, trying to turn him into a full walrus, which I would think requires him to eat fish, right? A starving Mr. Tusk has no choice, and he dives right in. Lapointe and the gang team up and work out where Wallace would have went. Allie knows that he loves to drink convenience store sodas, so that's their first stop. And, of course, the girls behind the counter, played by Kevin Smith and Johnny Depp's daughters, well, they remember Wallace. He even wrote down Howard's address on a pad of paper, which they still have, and using some clever techniques, they get their next lead.
I did in the Big Lebowski.
Do you know that that's exactly where I learned it from? Isn't that weird?
We see in a flashback that Howard was forced to actually eat his walrus friend so many years ago. Something he's still guilty about. He feels like he owes Mr. Tusk a fighting chance. So Howard dresses up as a walrus and they battle.
You will fight me, Mr. Walrus, or you will die!
This is ridiculously awesome. Howard does have another reason for doing this, however. He feels that in order for Wallace to go full walrus, he must kill him, which in the end he does, making the transition complete. Man to animal. But just then, right on cue, his friends show up to see this, horrified. No! 1 year later, Allie and Teddy go to an animal sanctuary where, you guessed it, Allie brings out a fish and Mr. Tusk is happy to eat it. She flashes back to a time when Wallace was still human, and she talks about when her grandma died. Her grandpa was crying, and he told her that it's a good thing that tears separate us from animals, showing that we have a soul. Back to present day, and we see Allie's crying. As they leave, Wallace sheds a tear, showing that he's still human under all that blubber. What a wild ride that was. Tusk is something everyone needs to see, preferably with a group of friends that knows how to laugh. The funny thing is, the beginning actually kind of pulls you in. The characters are well done and interesting, especially Howard. And then the big reveal happens and you're just like, what the heck am I watching? The payoff is perfectly dark and funny. I think this is what all movies should be. You know when you're sitting around with friends and you come up with some stupid idea and you laugh about how it would play out as a movie? Well, this is exactly what happened here. Kevin Smith has a podcast called Smodcast, and they basically came up with the idea on the spot. Kudos for them for giving it a budget and actually making it. I think that's what separates this movie from other silly movies. It's got a budget. Justin Long and Johnny Depp can't come cheap, plus the music and effects, all for a silly walrus movie. I love it. Watch Tusk, it's worth it. Some might think it's a waste of 1 hour and 42 minutes, but I would argue, isn't every movie? At least here you get a laugh. I give Tusk a solid 3 walrus boners out of 4.
That's me? That's my mustache?
Yep.